Welcome to Being Human with Steve Cuss. On Being Human, we take a look at the dynamics that infect all of our relationships, not just our human relationships, but also our relationship with ourselves and our relationship with God. It turns out that the same dynamics that infect our human relationships can also get in the way of awareness of God. And most of us, wherever you are tuning in from, we live in a very anxious culture, and there's so much reactivity spreading around. And when we learn to notice what's going on, we're less likely to catch and spread the anxiety. And actually, it opens our souls up to love and connect to a wider range of people. So when we're talking about human relationships, we're not just talking about your precious people, your friends and family. We're also talking about what the Bible would call your enemies, the people that frustrate you, that irritate you, that spend too much time in your head. And of course, we're also talking about our relationship with God. When we're filled with reactivity, our awareness of God goes away. That's why, Jacob in Genesis 28 said, "Surely the Lord was in this place, and I was not aware of it," because Jacob was filled with reactivity. So on this show, every week, we pause and we light a candle. We choose a candle because John reminds us that God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. And no matter how dark our world gets, we have a God who is light that casts out the darkness. Greater is he that is in me than he that is in the world. I am thrilled to introduce today's guests, Brian Heasley and Carla Harding. They are two wonderful leaders of the 24/7 prayer movement. You might have heard of that movement. You might be more familiar with the app, Lectio 365. We'll have links in the show notes for both, because that app, Lectio 365, is such a wonderful tool to help us relax into God's presence. I've had the privilege of spending some time with Brian and Carla, and they are remarkable people. But what's interesting in their case, I think, is the way God has both redeemed their own personal stories and also woven together their personal stories for the sake of the kingdom. Fundamentally, the 24/7 prayer movement is a movement of unity. Brian is Northern Irish. Carla is Irish. And they both grew up in the Troubles. Carla grew up Catholic. Brian grew up Protestant. And if you know your Irish and Northern Irish history, there was tremendous conflict based on religious division. And I just thought how timely for us to learn from Brian and Carla today, because there is so much religious division flying around, particularly on social media. I can't tell you how many times I'll see somebody, particularly on Twitter, will call out and say, if this Sunday at church your pastor doesn't do this, leave the church. And I think to myself, how in the world have anxious social media influencers gotten so much power over people? But of course, we just are catching and spreading each other's reactivity and anxiety, particularly religious reactivity and anxiety. And I think Brian and Carla have something for us today, not just their own personal journey, but their call to prayer. Let's join in on that conversation now. All right, Brian and Carla, you guys are part of this unbelievable worldwide explosion, this ministry that has just captivated so many people. Let's start with you, Carla. What is it?
We're part of the 24/7 prayer movement, which is an international but also interdenominational movement in the church. It starts in prayer. We feel like prayer is the key to everything, encountering the presence of God, learning to speak with God. It's like the greatest gift you could give anyone, but it can't stay in prayer. So we call it a prayer, mission and justice movement, because when you spend time talking to God about the things he cares about and you care about, sometimes he recruits you to be part of the answer. So he might send you out in mission, or he might break your heart for an injustice issue and propel you into action with your local church. So we get the privilege and pleasure of helping people all over the world learn to pray, but then think about how God might be inviting them to become an answer to prayer.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And then, Brian, how did it first begin, and when did it first begin?
It began actually September the 5th, 1999, in Carla's church. The guys there decided that they would set up a creative, interactive prayer room. And at that point, the only place you could go to see night and day prayer were places like Korea. So, the idea that in a little coastal town in England, people could somehow pray 24/7, was a little bit unknown. And I think when the guys started, it took off. And I was a pastor in the UK at the time, and my friend Pete Gregg, who set it all up, he said, guys, we've been doing this for like a week and it's gone into 3 months and it is fantastic. Are there other churches in the United Kingdom that would like to do this for 1 year? Could we do 52 weeks of prayer? And I was one of those early adopter pastors who went, yes, we'll take a week. And from there, honestly, Steve, it's grown. Like last week, for instance, we did Global Week of Prayer, and we saw in 1 week 2,365 prayer rooms around 140 different nations, all from that one prayer room. So it's been phenomenal. It's been about people making the effort to actually go to a space and a place. And it's almost like something happens in their hearts as they make that pilgrimage to that space and place, and it becomes a place of prayer and encounter. One of the things that sorry, because I nearly called Carla Tracy, and that's my wife's name. One of the things that Carla and I would hear a lot would be that I didn't believe I could pray for an hour. And when we create these zones and creative spaces, people are really, really warm to it, really engaged with the idea of praying for an hour, which is amazing. So you only need a reasonable size of group of people, and you can pull that off 24/7. So, yeah, that's how it works, and it really excites us. Yeah.
Yeah, and my home church, the church I'm a member of, was part of that week of prayer.
Wow.
And the stories that came in were incredible. People absolutely loved it. I keep a private journal. I just call it God's Expansive Kingdom. I get the privilege of traveling around the world. That's where the three of us met. Was at a place in Europe together. We were working at a conference together. I get the privilege of traveling around the world and meeting people who are on the edge of what God is doing in huge ways. Carla, what was it like to first see this spread like wildfire? Like the Spirit just sent this all around the world, way beyond what you could have imagined.
Honestly, it was a shock, because I wasn't there the very first launch day. I actually arrived as a fresher at university, my first year of university, into this city, into this church, a couple of weeks into the first prayer experiment. And I avoided it for the first few weeks because I was terrified I would break the chain of prayer. I found prayer so hard and so difficult. And I thought I was just someone who was never going to be good at it, that I thought I can't go. But when a friend dragged me along for her hour and said I could stay 10 minutes, I was so overwhelmed by the presence of God in that room that I actually spent about 2 hours the first time in the prayer room, for me, on my face, on the floor, just overwhelmed by the presence of God. And God took that first prayer room and turned it into my classroom and taught me how I was made to pray, which is incredible. But as this spread, suddenly we realized my story wasn't unique. People were experiencing this, the presence of God, that almost God was waiting for his church to try and learn to pray around the world so that he could speak and move. And then this hunger was ignited. It was a real surprise. Like, no one intended to start a movement. No one intended to start an organization. It had no name at the beginning. But to see it spread, not just around the UK, but it jumped very quickly into Europe and then beyond, to see that this was something on God's heart and how diverse the people of God who got involved were, it was such a surprise. I feel like I've spent the last 26 years just marveling at it. I've never got bored. I've loved being part of this for so long with Brian and others. But you just feel like this overwhelming sense of gratitude as you see it continue, how God's agenda to call his people into his presence and then propel them out to carry his presence to others just continues to grow in creativity and diversity. And it's amazing.
Yeah. And then you guys created an app. Like, people might be joining us here and saying, oh, I would love to be part of one of these church movements, but you do have an app. So, Brian, just tell us how people can make use of that app.
Well, one of the things we realized is that one of the few questions that the disciples asked Jesus was, Lord, teach us to pray. And so we were getting a lot of people engaging in the prayer room, but we were right on the cusp about 10 years ago thinking, are there other ways we can help people pray? So it was at that point where we came up with the idea of an app, a simple little app to teach people to pray the Bible every day, and we called that Lectio 365. Carla headed that up, and we pulled a little team together, and it seemed to be like, is this going to work? There's probably going to be Pete, me, and like my friend round the corner are going to use this, and it's going to be great. And the app just literally fell just into people's laps. And during COVID, really, it really expanded and grew, and people really moved towards like using it on a regular basis. And we have just seen exponential growth of that, and we get hundreds and hundreds of replies from people who encounter God on their own every day. It helps people pray on the go. It helps people sit quietly for 10 minutes in the morning or at lunchtime, or night prayers. We started, the old tradition of night prayers, which is lovely, just to pray before you lay your head down at night. And so the whole simple aspect of it was beautiful, and it captured something of the imagination of the time, and really it continues to grow to this day. It's now we have it in other languages around the world. It was fully translated in Spanish. It's in different places and spaces where people are using it. So it's been a wonderful thing to see it, and it probably shows there's a need, that there's a moment in everyone's day where we need to go, breathe in, just breathe in. I think sometimes we're very good as Christians and churches coming up with ideas and breathing out, and we need to learn to do both. Like inhale and exhale, inhale his presence, but then breathe him out during the day to others. But, it kind of helps us develop a healthy breath rhythm to our daily devotional life. And like some people I don't use it every day, Steve. I'll be honest, because I have my own little devotional life, there are some times when I'm traveling, I use it all the time. So for some people engage consistently, others dip in and out, and it's not a heavy burden that we put on anybody. It's something for people to enjoy, and it's just been the joy of our lives to see people really take hold of it. Carla could give you some phenomenal stories about people who have been, away from Jesus or on death's door or wherever, who have used this app, and it's been just phenomenal for them.
Yeah, I don't know how many apps I have on my phone, but it's on my home screen. My first screen is the Lectio 365 app. My wife, Lisa, is a much more faithful participant in it than I am. But I love what you just said, Brian. Like, it's just always there. When I'm noticing myself getting a bit reactive, or I've forgotten the Lord, I'm not aware of God's presence, the way you guys have designed, it's like a 12 to 18 minute experience. It's very difficult to participate in it and not relax into God's presence. You've built it in such a beautiful way with the scripture and the prayer and the music and the length, that particularly for people who feel like you're prayer rookies, we'll put a link in the show notes where you can download this app. Far and away my favorite prayer app.
Gosh.
This show, Being Human, what we pay attention to is the dynamics that get in the way of our relationships. All of the dynamics that I teach, they started on the therapy couch. Marriages and families coming in, trying to figure out how to get along better. And there's just a handful of us that took it off the therapy couch and said, wait a minute, these are the same dynamics that get in the way of our awareness of God. Like when we're reactive, we lose sight of the Lord. When we are living out of assumptions that aren't true, we're now in a false reality. And I want to take our conversation there. How have you found noticing what's going on in you as a helpful signal to pray? This is a complicated question. I'm not always good at asking simple questions, but when I was younger in church, it was almost like we were taught, just reach out to God and he'll be there, which is theologically true. But if I'm disconnected from myself, it's harder for me to notice the Lord. Whereas as I get older, I'm becoming more and more aware of what's going on in me. And now I have something to exchange. I give God my reactivity. God gives me his peace. Just wanted to get both of your reaction to that. Carla, maybe we'd start with you.
Yeah, no, I do relate to what you're saying. For me, I'm someone who's very aware of their body and my physicality. So for me, when I start to feel anxious, I feel it physically in my chest here. Like I feel tightness. And the thing I've tried to practice is to become aware when that sensation starts, because it can give me an indication of what's going on inside my mind, my heart, that maybe I'm not yet consciously surfacing. So for me, I try to pay attention to how's my body, like is my shoulders tensing, is my chest tense, and then just take a moment to reflect. Okay, why? Why am I in this space of this fearful place? Why do I feel threatened or anxious in this moment? And I find for myself, giving myself a moment to step away mentally or physically if I can really helps me. So I'm really fortunate. My job allows me to take time out to pray. I'm paid to do that. What a privilege. Best job ever. So like today, for example, I took an hour to go walk the canal near my home. And I sometimes find that when I'm carrying something and maybe I'm not yet sure why I'm reacting the way I am, that walk for me is incredibly helpful. That's a walk with God. And sometimes I'm just bringing him, God, I'm anxious. This situation is stressing me out. Why? What's underneath this? What am I worried about? And getting to kind of just talk that through with God's that's my ideal. You don't always get that ability to go literally walk off with God and talk, but trying to notice my body, trying to name the thing under the anxiety and the fear. What is it I'm afraid of here? And then starting with God. Okay, God, I name that I'm afraid of this. That's my typical prayer practice in the day when I have these moments. And then do I need to do anything else about it? Do I need to talk to the person that I'm probably projecting all this anxiety towards? Or, is there another step I can take in this? That's usually my pattern of awareness and prayer.
Yeah, that's really good. Brian, how about you? Are you naturally aware of what's bubbling inside you, or not so much?
I wouldn't probably feel it so physically. I would be more of I notice when I haven't stepped into the presence of God or prayed or read my Bible and stuff, and it's kind of one of two things. One is I'm a bit of a bury my head in the sand, get lethargic, watch Netflix, chill, all of that, just like take it easy. And then I'm like, oh my goodness, Brian, you haven't read your Bible wake up, grab your phone. Before you know it, you're looking at Labradors on Instagram, rolling in puddles of mud and chuckling to yourself. And you're like, oh my goodness, I need to be in a meeting in 10 minutes. And because, we all work from home these days, you're kind of like downstairs in half in your pajamas because you've been wasting your time on Instagram. And so before I know it, I think I'm eating, and that happens more when I'm tired. And I've started. I have to really watch when I'm tired that I become weirdly distracted. So I'm a journaler. So I would then, I'll take my journal out. I'll write. I'll process a lot of where I'm going with the written word, and I also have like a journal Bible as well. So I write loads of notes there, and most of the time, if I'm really struggling, Steve, I try not to look for anything new. I go to some of the old wells to some of the old scriptures that I know and some of the old things that I've read before, just to almost reignite me. So I kind of that means I'm often dipping back into like John chapter 1 because I love it as all those kind of things. So for me, they're helpful, but even at our age, me and Carla are definitely not the same age. I'm way older, but at my age, I kick myself at how often I can let that go. How often I could be lethargic for. You think, my goodness, it's been like 10 days. It's been, we're not just, these things happen. And I'm like, oh my goodness, how did that happen so quickly? So, yeah. And it's at that point where I need to re-engage.
Yeah. Both of you have an Irish heritage. Brian from Northern Ireland, Carla from Republic of Ireland. The majority of my audience are from the United States, but we actually have quite a global audience. So some of my audience may be familiar with the Troubles. Some may not be familiar with that term, but I think everyone's familiar with the conflict, the fundamentally religious, violent conflict that really was hot and heavy in the 70s and 80s. both of you experienced some version of that in your childhood. I'm always interested when people have a unique childhood, particularly when that unique childhood has significant trauma or challenge, that at some point in their life, they first become aware, whoa, that was weird or that was unusual. Like whatever you experienced as a kid, that's just what you experienced. But then maybe you get to be a teenager in your 20s and you get perspective and distance on it. Carla, what was that moment like for you?
So when I lived in Northern Ireland, I lived there from 4 years old to 8 years old. And I have so many great memories of it, like so many gorgeous friends, great things, good school, excellent stuff. But at the same time, there were some very difficult things going on in my family. Because of my dad's job, he was targeted by a paramilitary group. And they threatened him. They made attempts on his life at one point. And you can imagine the stress on a family. Now, I have to say, my parents are incredible and they managed to shield us from most of it. But, you know, kids pick stuff up. And I knew some of it as we were there. I'm the eldest of three. I knew something was happening and we weren't safe. And then when I was 8, it got to the point where we had to move to England. So we moved, which is why I sound like this today. And it was when I was a teenager and I'd listened to my parents tell the story of their experience of Northern Ireland, the enormity of it, I think, for our family really hit me. There was that moment, but there was also the moment of moving to England was frightening for me in one sense, because by the time we moved, there was quite a police presence and quite an army presence near our house in Northern Ireland. And when we moved to England, I can't remember how long it was till I saw a policeman. And I remember thinking I felt so unsafe because where are the police? Or the first time I saw a police station and it looked like a library to me. It didn't look like a police station from Northern Ireland in the Troubles, which with massive walls and barbed wire. And I was like, that's not a police station. Or we used to have this thing in Northern Ireland where we couldn't touch the car until Dad had checked under it, which he didn't tell us he was checking for car bombs. That we worked out later. But when we got to England and we no longer had to play that game anymore, that was like what we don't have to. It was just an adjustment. But it was like you say, it was normal because my parents did a phenomenal job of loving us and protecting us and living through that. It was when we left it that I realized how maybe unusual that childhood was and some of the decisions my parents had to make and the ways they kept us safe, kept themselves safe, lived in the community were different to other people's childhoods. Maybe not in Northern Ireland, but definitely in England. So, yeah.
I think our relationship with God is profoundly impacted by the meaning we make out of our childhood experiences. And I'm wondering what meaning you might have made, like in my case, some of the protective mechanisms that I have operated out of based on some childhood experiences. Does that trigger anything for you?
Yeah, definitely. There are two things that really stayed with me from Northern Ireland. One not so helpful, and one that seeded a passion in me that I'm grateful for. The not so helpful is we had to be quite careful what we spoke about in certain circles to keep my dad safe. And unfortunately, I carried forward an anxiety around saying the wrong thing. But the response I would have in my late teens and early 20s to maybe having misspoken or said the wrong thing and something imprudently about someone else would be to the level like I put their life at danger. So it took me a while to process that, and I had some counselling and I had some prayer and it really helped. But kind of an oversensitivity to certain things really did come with me from Northern Ireland. But at the same time, the thing I'm really grateful for is I didn't really understand the politics of Northern Ireland. I was a young child. I didn't get it. All I understood was that two sets of people that called themselves Christians fought one another. That's very, very basic and not the complexity or nuance of Northern Ireland. But that's what I understood as a child, and it felt wrong in my heart. Like it felt wrong down to my bones that Christians, followers of Jesus, fought one another and didn't like one another and disagreed. Not everyone, obviously. There are many phenomenal believers who pioneered the way to peace in that beautiful country, but some. And for me, it put a seed in my heart for a passion for Christian unity that I get to see some of through my work today. And I'm so grateful. I get to see Catholics and Protestants praying together, because we may disagree on certain interpretations of theology in our faith. We may have difference in our practice, but we love Jesus and we love to pray and talk with God, and we can agree on it. And getting to serve Protestants and Catholics together in prayer has been one of the greatest joys. And I think that's really informed by not getting to see that in my youth.
Oh, it's so healing to hear, like the absolute rift that was going on that is now being mended, and that, I mean, what a good God, Carla, that you get to be on the front lines of seeing that as well. Brian, what does any of this trigger in you? We can go back to the same question, or it might trigger a different response in you.
Well, it triggers a lot, but not in a. So I grew up in Belfast. I was born there, knew nothing else until I was 11. So I remember walking in the 70s to church in the morning, walking across a paramilitary roadblock and my mum just gone, morning, and the guys all gone, morning, Eileen, and we're all stepping over this paramilitary roadblock, or going to a prayer meeting when I remember about 5, coming out of a prayer meeting with my dad on the Castlereagh Road in Belfast, and up the top there were 2 double-decker buses on fire, and then this other bus came down, stopped outside the church, and a man with a stocking over his head and a gun in his hand got out of the bus and thanked the bus driver for giving him a lift and went home. So he just kidnapped the bus to get home easy. And so and honestly, the way I'm chuckling now was probably how we felt. But when I think, so when we moved to England, I felt I deeply missed Belfast. I missed Northern Ireland because we didn't leave because of trauma or threat. It felt like I was being wrenched out of everything I knew into a strange new world where people would laugh at you because of your accent. If we moved into England in '79 and over the next number of years, the IRA bombing campaign in England meant that people weren't particularly kind to anybody with a Northern Irish accent or an Irish accent. So in Belfast, I'd been in a little world of East Belfast where I didn't travel out of it much, and so there was everybody liked you, whereas you're now in a place where you're having to deal with people laughing at the way you spoke. You were having to deal with, we were called paddies a lot. I've got 4 brothers, so that, and alongside, which we probably don't want to go all the way here, but alongside that, after 18 months of moving to England, my mother passed away. And so we were like, my dad, who's, in his mid-30s with 4 children, trying to raise them in a country that we're not particularly used to, and he didn't feel he should move back to Ireland. So all of that probably, and so we were always taught we were never taught the paramilitary songs or the ways or anything like that. We were always taught, God loves everybody and all of that. But there was in my background a real sense of Catholics aren't Christians. I mean, literally, that would be as clear as a bell, and some of that came out of the sense of in some of the older people in the South, when they became Christians. My dad's got friends who were, you've become a born again Christian, you have to leave the village. We see that in Spain and we see that in Ireland, where there was a kind of like the priest had a lot of power in the town. It's waned over the years, but you're going to have to leave because of your faith. So maybe 3 years ago, I had the opportunity to go to the Vatican for a meeting to discuss, actually, Lectio 365 with a cardinal, and who was, worked for Pope Francis. And it was a lovely, it was kind of cool. I enjoyed it. It felt weird as a boy from East Belfast to be traipsing up the halls of the Vatican to go and talk to a guy whose line manager was the Pope, a cardinal. Sorry, I don't want to offend any of your Catholic views. And but here's I'm with Carla. I'm so passionate about unity, but my own father didn't speak to me for 2 months after that.
After the Vatican visit.
Yeah, after the Vatican visit. So I had to work really hard at that, and I had to make a conscious effort. If I want to pursue unity, it's going to make it difficult for my dad, who grew up in a very different time and a very different, he's 80. I'm not going to change his views. Well, he's actually softened a lot, and he loves me dearly, and he's a great father. So I wouldn't want anybody to think he's a bigot and, running around and all that. He just found it incredibly difficult because his best friend was one of those guys who was asked to leave the village, So so there was a clash of arcs, and I'm there at the other end of it saying, God, we need to work with these guys. There's so much beauty. Carla talks about laying down in a prayer room for 2 hours. That's basically Catholic adoration. We're kind of like, when we do Lectio, a lot of it's inspired by monks and nuns from all sorts of traditions. So
Yeah.
I think the Protestant church is really quite happy to use a lot of the stuff from the Catholic world, but when it actually goes to crossing the threshold, we're not always as good. Sorry, I didn't mean to get preachy on unity. Sorry, Steve. But so there's a whole batch there from me.
Well, not to mention your own deep love of Caravaggio. I don't know how your dad's feeling about that.
Oh, he loves a good painting. He loves a good painting. So yeah, Caravaggio's fine. He's quite old.
Caravaggio is very old.
Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to stay on this topic because I was really struck, Carla. I think you said it succinctly, and I'm going to say it back in a different way. Christians who love Jesus and are profoundly against each other, it feels like America is in a lot of trouble nowadays in this same area. I think we are having troubles of our own, where people who love Jesus have such wildly different views on what fidelity to Christianity and fidelity to Jesus looks like. And then they're deciding to take their oppositional views onto social media and cause more and more distance. You guys must be seeing that happening over here across the pond. What does that do in your heart?
Honestly, it does two things. It breaks my heart, and it challenges me, because I realize I do it without realize. I am passionate about unity, and yet there'll be streams of the church I'm so quick to criticize, even if it's just in my head or in my heart. So I have to own my own part of the problem. I have to own the fact that there are certain streams of the church or expressions of Christianity that I am too judgmental of. Even if I don't choose to worship that way, that's fine. But I recognize there's a reactivity in me to that. I have to own it. I have to pray about it. I have to repent for it sometimes. Like, that's not loving my brother. It's not the way I react sometimes internally. But I think the thing that's helped me growing up in the movement we have, working across different streams of the church, I used to enter rooms focused on our differences. And they're sometimes the easiest things to notice, like how do we approach worship or theology or politics or whatever it might be? What are our differences? But actually entering a room looking for where are our similarities and building from that place, where do we agree? where can I honestly say we are 100% together on this? And building from there and allowing for the fact that, yes, of course, we have our personal conviction. I have mine. I worship in the stream of the church. I worship in for a good reason, a thoughtful reason. But my stream of the church is not perfect. And I've learned over the years, and I will learn over my lifetime where we have got it wrong. If I can enter conversation, relationship, environments with other Christians, acknowledging that I'm going to have some things wrong, it helps me have grace for others if I think they have some things I deeply care about wrong. But I want to keep what's common clearer. And if I enter antagonistically, if I enter with our difference into conversation, I think this is super easy online, because you don't have to look anyone in the eye. You don't have to see the impact of what you've said written on their face. So we all lose our empathy online. But taking a breath before we do that would be helpful for starters. But I think particularly face-to-face, it's actually easier because you see a human before you and you realise this human is going to have some stuff wrong and this human's going to have some stuff to teach me. Am I willing to learn?
Yeah. This show is all about connection, noticing when you're disconnected, and reactivity. It puts humans into a posture that's no longer human-sized. We either get bigger than human or we get smaller than human. The extreme version of bigger than human is violence or abuse, some of these horrific things. But a very common version of being bigger than human is mansplaining, giving someone advice when they didn't ask for it. I'm prone to that. If somebody's just sharing about their day, my brain is telling me to tell them what to do, even though they're not asking. That would be a simple example of getting bigger. Getting smaller than human, at its most extreme is needing to flee to safety. And then in more mild cases, it would be no longer speaking up in a meeting because you're trying to keep your head down. Maybe the person in the meeting is getting bigger, and so you compensate by getting smaller. When we're bigger than human, we forget the Lord because we've taken up all that space where our soul is aware of God. When we're smaller than human, we forget the Lord because God's no longer our refuge. I now must be my own refuge. I have to be in a protective state. Brian, as you hear that, we're helping our audience notice when they are bigger and smaller. Which way do you tend to go? Oftentimes people go both. What's your reaction to that?
If you'd asked me maybe 10 years ago, I'd have said I always got bigger, and would always want to throw myself around a wee bit and, be a bit more dominant. I come from a family that's all about winning the argument. They love a debate and they love and we love trivial pursuit because we like to know the answer, and I love it and I enjoy it to this day. But there is something in me that's a little bit like, I reacted to that after a while, Steve, and started to think this isn't the best way to show up in a room. My words can be cutting. I think quickly. I speak quickly. I've learned probably to hold back more than I used to. But the downside of that is I think probably now I shrink back more and become less, and a bit nervous about saying what I really think sometimes. I think there's even on the online debate, I came off nearly every social media platform because it just used to make me too angry. And that wasn't me getting smaller. That was also a bit about me monitoring how much of my time I waste. But at the same time, that whole area where you see people with opinions, I'd want to get bigger and challenge the opinion. And then because I wouldn't literally do it, I would live in this kind of turmoil space of imagined conflict. I don't know if that's a thing. Do you know what I mean? Where you're just thinking about what you want to say. It's there's a French word for it, isn't it? It's called the spirit of the stairs. I can't speak French. Where you walk away afterwards and you think, I wish I had said this, and I would find that I should have said this, I should have done that. And whereas in the past, I just would have done it and thought, who cares about the consequences? Whereas I think now in the world of wanting to be a peacemaker, you can occasionally shrink back and not say the church has got to find a voice that is both, or we've got to find a voice that can challenge stuff. That's the challenge I find there, where it's really hard to challenge without appearing argumentative and wanting to dominate, and then the opposite. I'd love you to tell us how we find that middle space, really, because for me, that's the journey I would find myself on. I'm on this kind of pendulum of like swing this way and that way, and I would imagine right now I would try and be smaller because I don't want to bring my personality and my 30 years of ministry history into the room, and you don't have and people say these things that suck the life out of us. I remember someone once said to me, Brian, when you come into a room, you suck all the air out of the room, and that lives in my head. Because you're like, oh no, my goodness, I don't want to suck all the air out of the room. I want to. So, yeah, I don't want to get on the couch here, but like, I haven't got all the answers to it. But I'm probably aware that as I've got older, I'm more self-aware of like when I'm dominating and being big, and I almost counterbalance that by being overly small.
Yep. You're being so helpful right now because you're really letting us into the journey of a lot of particularly men. We don't realize when we're younger and ambitious and getting after it and using all that aggression, we don't realize that's just a coping mechanism. We think it's strong leadership instead of realizing, oh man, that's the only way I know how to survive the world. I will come back to your, invitation about, man, what do we do about this? But Carla, how about for you?
I would say it depends on the context, whether I get bigger or smaller. When I'm in my place of comfort, my danger would be to get too big and to try to rise to every occasion and, just become more confident and enthusiastic and bigger and louder, and it'll be fine because I've learned to rise above. But if I'm in a place where I don't feel I've got the safety of relationship around me, or it's not an area I'm comfortable in, I have stepped back, made myself less self-protected, definitely. I think the thing that's helped, I've not at all nailed this, but the thing that's helped me just be human-sized, you used that phrase, I love that phrase, is really good friends in my local church who we made an agreement we're going to be completely transparent, honest, warts and all with one another for years now. Like a number of close group of friends I've got, and I'm so grateful for them because they don't look at me as anything other than me, and they don't expect me to be perfect, and they don't expect me to be awful. They call me when I'm not being great either, but they expect me to be precisely human. And to have friendships like that has been really helpful. Practicing it with them first and then being able to practice it elsewhere has been, I don't know if this is what you mean by that phrase, but for me, that's what it means to me. I even have a thing I say to myself. I didn't know you were going to talk about this, but sometimes my inner monologue can get quite negative and critical. And when it starts to do that, I say to myself, I am human. Yeah. I am human, which means I am good and I'm loved and I'm made by God and I am flawed and I make mistakes and I am imperfect and I have chips on my shoulder. I'm both. I'm human. So cut myself some slack sometimes.
Well, I love this conversation because the way you talk about your friends, as I'm listening to that, Carla, what you are basically telling us is they took away any need for a protective coping mechanism.
Yeah.
There's no benefit in putting on a front or going into hiding around them. It doesn't gain you anything. Therefore, you don't need to do it. You just relax. And that is the goal, is that we can learn to be exactly ourselves in a wider variety of situations, including, Brian, the way you said you love Trivial Pursuit and you also love, or your family loves a good argument. That's often the case. What do we do? Jesus of Nazareth, I find it interesting to open my Bible and read the Gospels through the lens of anxiety flying around. You start to realize, holy smokes, it was always flying around Jesus, and yet the only time it ever came out of him was when he was intentionally provoking. Like, he really did enjoy provoking religious leaders sometimes. Sometimes he would heal someone more out of spite than out of, it's not very cool to say, but like the Pharisees would be like, you can't heal that person. And he's like, well, I wasn't going to, but now you can see, so once in a while he would intentionally provoke, but more often than not, you see all the anxiety flying around him. Even, for example, when he's standing in front of Pontius Pilate, and Caiaphas and the religious leaders are accusing him falsely, and he feels no need to defend himself, get bigger than them. It's really remarkable. And my theory is it's because of how deeply he was connected to the Father. He had nothing to lose, nothing to prove. Can be exactly himself. I'm not there. I'm there, I don't know, 20, 30% of the time. That's not a bad score, I think.
That's pretty good.
For a human, yeah. All right. Any final words from you, Brian, on this? And then I fear we have to get into the gauntlet.
My only one observation is that I think I became better at being human when I became a father. I think having children made me a better human because it made me realize I love these guys even though they poop their nappies and, do whatever, I still love them. And even when they do silly things or whatever, and they do beautiful things, whatever, and I think that really helped. Parenthood really helped my humanity. Now, I'm not saying everybody needs to do that to help, but I think it made me, it definitely changed who I was as a human, and the obvious being married too. But both of those other people have made me more human. Yeah.
Okay.
Other humans. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you guys for being willing just to dive into the bigger, smaller. We're encouraging our folks just to notice it in ourselves, but also notice it in others, and just the way our own posture can help relax another person. I think, Carla, that's what your friends have given for you, and I'm imagining you guys are doing that for your friends as well. Okay, so the gauntlet, rapid fire, deep questions with short answers. It's kind of cruel by design. Let's start. Carla, we'll go with you first. What's one way that you treat other people that if you treated yourself the same way, your life would be better?
Grace. I extend other people grace in their mistakes far more than myself.
Brian, how about you?
I listen better to others than I do to myself.
Hey, very good. Okay. Do you guys have right now a gap between what you believe about God versus what you experience from God?
Oh, yes. In the prayers I've been praying for years, some of the prayers I've been praying for years, I do see God answer prayer, and I'm grateful. And my primary mode in prayer is connection, not answer. But there are prayers I've been praying for a long time that I know are within God's general character, will, power, and they've not happened yet. And I feel that tension sometimes.
Okay, yeah. Frederick Buechner, I think, was the one that said the hardest thing is that God can but doesn't. Or God can but doesn't always. Yeah, that is the crux of it. Yeah. Brian, how about for you?
I guess for me, I've been battling with this idea of, is my relationship with God based on what he does for me? Or is Jesus enough? If he never answered any more of my prayers, I'm not saying he won't. I'm just saying if it never happened, the phrase I keep getting from Jesus right now is, am I enough? Or is my relationship with God based on that? Oh, I had a great time at worship. Oh, he spoke to me. Oh, I prayed and my house sold. But if none of that happened, would I still love Jesus? Or is my relationship based on, have I turned it into a house of trade? So it's a bit dark, but yeah. So I'm battling with that. The phrase I'm writing in my journal every time I write now is, "Am I enough?" Question mark. It's like Jesus asking that to me.
Yeah.
That's the gap.
Yep. Okay. When the local church is at its best, what does it offer that you cannot get anywhere else?
Hope. When the local church is at its best, it offers hope. Yeah.
Forgiveness and the potential for redemption and reconnection.
Okay, you guys have sailed through. Last question. When in your life lately have you felt most fully and completely loved?
I can answer this one quite quickly. It was my birthday recently, and my husband took the day off work, and my kids were home, and they basically made the day all my favourite things. And you know when you have a day with your favourite people, and they just know you so well, and then love you so beautifully with all your favourite love languages, and I was walking on air.
Amazing. Well done.
I was recently away for Father's Day, and when I got home, both my sons took me out to an Indian restaurant, and we had food, we had fun, and we wandered around London, sat in a park, chilled out, spent time together, bought stuff. I felt really loved that day.
My guests are Brian Heasley and Carla Harding. They are on the team that has done the incredible 24/7 prayer movement, which, of course, they started and God has fueled and spread. They're also the ones that help with the Lectio 365 app. You will hear their same voices on that app if you join. Brian and Carla, this has been a delight for me. Thank you so much for coming on Being Human.
Oh, thank you, Steve. It's been an absolute joy to be with you.
It has. Thank you so much.